Fat Puppy here, and I am in the old Presbyterian burial ground just outside the old Quaker cemetery in Camden, South Carolina. Very historic town, very historic cemeteries. Now this is an interesting monument, and I don't know if you can hear it or not. They had some maintenance going on behind me. You may hear that, you may not, but that's what's going on with that. Now, what is this? This is the gravesite of Colonel Henry. I'm reading my notes, by the way. There's a lot of stuff here, and there's no way I can remember this. Who was born 1800. He was well-liked, generous. He was a local attorney. He was killed in a duel. He was killed. Now, Henry Nixon was, by the way, a colonel in the militia. Thomas Hopkins was a major. That's the one that killed him. He was born in 1803. A good soldier and a fantastic shot. So they had bad blood, family bad blood. In 1824, the Hopkins family sued the Nixon family, accusing William Nixon, the father of Colonel Nixon, accusing him of fraud in a land deal. The Hopkins family won. Obviously, this would be an embarrassment to Colonel Henry Nixon. A few years later, which is what led to this, Colonel Nixon criticized some military maneuvers of Colonel Hopkins of the regiment. This is what you call messing with a man's honor. And sometimes we fight it out. Sometimes we just go our separate ways. They decided to do a duel, which was kind of sketchy on how legal it was back then. This is in the 1820s. So, challenge was issued, challenge was accepted. By the way, this is the entrance to that. His dad built that. There is no plaque here that explains all this, or even what that wall is for, but it seems to me, I remember there was a plaque here a few years ago. I had to look all this stuff up to get to the, I mean, they had a basic story, they didn't have the whole story, and on the plaque, but I mean, now there's no plaque. I just happen to know about this, and it's in the pamphlet of the tombs in this area. By the way, this is the marker of Neil Smith. He was a merchant, and he was obviously dead before the duel, and I will tell you how I know that in just a second. It's kind of an odd stone because it doesn't say when he died, it just says how old he was. Him and his wife both. They died separately, they didn't die at the same time. It did say they were from Glasgow, so I'm wondering if that ties in with the Agnes of Glasgow story that I recorded earlier. Now, I'm going to move the camera so I can show you something real interesting that has to do with this duel. The reason why I know Mr. Smith died before the duel is because his stone was actually used as target practice for Hopkins, the guy that ended up winning the duel. I wish the light was coming from a different direction, so I'm not sure you're going to see this, but right there, right there, right there, 3 spots where the bullet, the ball, what do you want to call it, hit when Hopkins was practicing. So yeah, Mr. Neil Smith was dead. And you know, I don't know why he picked this stone. I don't know if he already didn't like the guy, or if he was just in the cemetery and decided he would pop a few shots this way. It'd be really interesting to know that. I got a feeling that one's just lost in history. So January 15th, hey, that's today, by the way, 1829, they met at 1 o'clock at the Sandbar Ferry near Augusta, Georgia. Augusta's right there on the borderline of North Carolina and Georgia. I'm sorry, South Carolina and Georgia. And the jurisdiction was real questionable about that. So they decided to go all the way to Augusta, which is about 100 miles away, to do this. Now, this is 1820s. I mean, you didn't just ride there. It took a few days to get there. Colonel Nixon, the one who is buried here, wore a fancy coat with a white handkerchief right over the breast area. Major Hopkins remarked the man has marked his heart for me to hit. They walked their paces, turned. Hopkins, an excellent shot, fired, hitting Nixon, who was 29 years old. By the way, Hopkins was 26 years old. They were both in their 20s and 3 years apart. He hit him right side the chest. Colonel Nixon, as he was falling to the ground, aimed a shot, but it was an aimless shot. It was just a shot going off, and died. And his dad buried him here. Now, kind of a side interesting story to this is that Hopkins, the guy that killed him, felt terrible about this. He was full of remorse, felt like his hand was forced, and just hated that he did this. And he actually died about 3 years later, they said, from just the grief and the guilt. And he's actually buried about 3 or 4 miles up the road at a Swift Creek Baptist Church Cemetery, which is an old historical church that is no longer in use, nor has been for a long time. And so he died 3 years later, also at the age of 29. Now later on, if I can find the tombstone, there's another duel that took place, and it was one of the last duels in the United States. And but that'll be in a later video.